Neither Julian nor anyone else in 1936 had any idea what a powerhouse the soybean would become. Today, the soybean is one of the pillars of American agriculture, second only to corn among the major crops. 70 million acres of farmland are planted in soy, with an annual harvest worth more than $20 billion. Soy is used in a wide range of products, from food and medicine to paper and plastics.
It's a very widely used commodity. If you go down to the grocery store and look at the label, you'll find soybean oil in there somewhere. Soybeans originally came into this country from China as a hay crop for grazing for beef cattle, but also manufactures its own nitrogen. And back in the 1920s, well then everybody needed that because we didn't have a lot of commercial fertilizer back then. But then as our machinery developed, we learned that we could cut and process these soybeans and break them down into feed for our animals and soy oil for human consumption.
But soybeans really took off in the 1930s when industry discovered the plant, thanks in part to the efforts of an unlikely champion, automaker Henry Ford. Ford planted thousands of acres of soybeans, and alongside his Dearborn auto plant, he built a soybean laboratory and processing factory.
Ford sets up a laboratory in the early 1930s, hires a young self-trained chemist to run the laboratory, and they begin doing lots of experiments trying to figure out how you could use soybeans in making cars.
Out of his lab came new soybean-based auto paints, lubricating oils, and soybean-based plastics that Ford turned into steering wheels, gear shift knobs, and dent-proof fenders.
Industrial chemists are working to find new uses for soybean oil and soybean meal.
Soon, other industrialists were following Ford's lead, building soybean processing plants across the Midwest. One of the first to embrace the miracle bean was Percy Julian's new boss, Adrian Joyce of the Glidden Company. Under Joyce, Glidden had grown from a single paint store in Cleveland into one of the nation's leading paint manufacturers.
But Joyce didn't stop there. He diversified into a wide range of products. Turkey Famous Foods was a Glidden brand. He also moved into soybean processing.
Convinced the soybean would be critical to Glidden's future, Joyce set up a new soya products division in Chicago. The first assignment for his new research director? Isolate the protein of the soybean, something that had never been done on an industrial scale. Julian plunged into his new job, keenly aware that people were watching to see how this black chemist would measure up.
The people in the plant were always mindful of a white laboratory coat, a blur that might swoop down at any moment.
I'm working with a crystal. He would pester you at many times. He would keep, wanting to know what was new every half an hour almost.
And he expected you to tell him something different every time he came in there, something that was favorable.
But for more than a year, the news was not favorable.
In chemistry, things don't ever go the way you plan it because you've got reactions that are very critical. Even the little variation in temperature and concentration and time and everything will give you a bad outcome.
Eventually, Julian's chemists found just the right combination of time, temperature, and acidity to pull the protein out of the soybean. Julian's alpha protein was the first vegetable protein produced in bulk anywhere in America. It made millions for Glidden as a new industrial paper coating. Later, it would be a key ingredient in one of the first water-based or latex house paints, Glidden's Spread Satin.
Get new Spread House paint.
After alpha protein, Adrian Joyce urged Julian to turn his attention to other parts of the soybean.
Joyce was always trying to figure out every possible use for everything you have. Find out, is there some chemical in here that we otherwise might be throwing down the drain that we might be able to make money out of?
Julian drove his staff to turn the soybean inside out.
Julian wanted everyone to perform to the best of their ability. And he did everything in his power to motivate people to do that.
You call yourself a chemist?
Yes, doctor.
I always thought he was a master psychologist. I think he was very much aware of what he was doing and who he was doing it to.
His purpose was to get the best out of you. I think that's what it was all about.
The chemistry invented by Julian and his team led to scores of new products. From soybean oil came lecithin to make chocolate smoother, new salad oils and shortenings for jerky, and a new non-spattering margarine.
Always, when you were working on one thing, there was another thing coming up. You were always thinking ahead of time. What was the next big thing?
From soybean meal came plastics, linoleum, plywood glue, high-protein livestock feed, and dog food.
Oh, he was brilliant. He would set on a research project, and he would write the introduction and the description of the work and a conclusion. He did everything except do the experiments.
And there would be a statement or something to the effect that the problem is solved, all that remains to be done is. And many of us used to cringe at this because it would be our responsibility to get this to work, and sometimes it didn't work.
He was very demanding, and that was on a daily basis. I mean, because he had his hands on everything that went on.
Yes, there's magic in this Cinderella crop, and we've hardly scratched the surface.
The stream of products coming out of Julian's lab joined the flood of household and industrial goods from Dow, DuPont, and other companies whose chemistry was changing the way Americans lived.
Nylon stockings, introduced in 1938.
There's barely a minute of your time on Earth that is not in some way made secure and comfortable through chemistry.
There was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for chemicals in the 1930s.
Here are the headquarters of a group of super sleuths engaged in solving some of the major mysteries of the universe. They take molecules apart and put them together again in a different form to make new and incredible things.
People saw the industry as sort of the leading edge of high technology, of providing goods and services that were going to make people's lives better than to keep the economy growing.
The nation's industrial skyline parted in the middle to make room for the growing chemical industry.
Glidden's new soybean division was a success. Julian's reward was a raise that allowed him to be reunited with Anna.